Hi, I'm Khrystyna Klimash, and you are on a podcast, Building Digital Product, where we speak about the technologies that can boost your business here and now. And today's guest is Elisha Tropper. He is a business strategist and entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience in building enterprise value for companies of all sizes. Elisha has successfully led multiple ventures, including Jack Capital Holdings and Cabrin Security Seals, where he is a principal and CEO. His expertise spans strategy development, digital integration, and private business investment. Now, Elisha Tropper is also the founder of a management consulting advisory firm committed to helping clients achieve long-term growth and enhanced enterprise value. Glad to see you here, Elisha.
Hi, nice to be with you, Khrystyna.
You are a very great expert in creating digital strategies for companies of all sizes. Based on your first-hand experience, what do you see as the most essential components of a robust digital strategy that can make a business competitive?
I think any digital strategy has to be focused. You have to have a specific goal, and the entire strategy has to always remember that you're focused towards achieving that goal. Once you start deviating into other areas, I think you lose sight. When you lose sight of your goal, you lose the effectiveness of the digital strategy and the impact of whatever your strategy is attempting to achieve.
We are hearing a lot about planning, growth, and company development in advance. But how do companies have to balance this planning for a long-term vision with the ability to be agile and adaptable to market changes and technology updates, like AI, for instance?
So no one knows the future. People can predict it, you can think about it, you can hope it, but the only future that impacts you is the future that you make for yourself, the decisions you make and the strategies that you pursue and how you implement them. So the best thing that you can do is, at the moment, you choose the very best strategy that you think is going to help you going forward, but you have to always be, like you said, agile enough to be able to pivot or adjust or transform totally depending on what the situations dictate. There's no surefire way or no solution to say this is it and we're never going to change. I mean, every company in the world, you look back 5 years, the strategy was very different. It wasn't what it is today. From the smallest company to the largest company, you're continually changing and evolving. So even when you make a 5-year plan, no one expects when you're at year one that year 5 is going to be exactly what your plan was in year 1. It's the best guess at this time, but you're continually changing it and you're continually evolving it.
Agree. Some founders sometimes rush into full-scale development of a company or even new product features without validating their digital product ideas. What strategy do you advise entrepreneurs to employ to thoroughly test their assumptions and gather meaningful user feedback during the early stages?
That's a really broad-ranging question because depending on the company, the industry, the size of the company, what the strategy, what it is you're doing, it could be a lot of things. But I think as a general rule, you're always looking for your return on investment in anything you do. So a digital strategy is no different. You're investing something, you want to understand what the return is going to be and how to maximize that. So before you dive into it, before you spend on it, and when I say spend, I don't just mean money, I mean time, effort, focus, personnel, whatever it is, resources, you really need to plot out and understand, okay, what are we going to do and how is this going to impact all of our stakeholders? And do the best that you can to anticipate, estimate, predict what that's going to be and what those reactions are going to be and what the impact and what the return is going to be on that. And then you make a decision. And once you do make a decision, like I said before, you go full force, with everything into that decision, but you have to stay nimble and you have to stay agile. And if the impact isn't what you thought it was going to be, or if the results aren't what you thought it was going to be, or if even in one area it's just a little different than what you thought it was going to be, don't get locked in your feet in cement and say, well, I can't move because I've committed to this. Always be able to adjust, always be able to pivot.
Pricing digital products can be complex. Entrepreneurs have to consider factors like market dynamics, customer segmentation, available monetization, models for their products, and many others. What pricing strategies do you typically advise entrepreneurs to explore, and how do you help them arrive at the optimal pricing structure?
So again, it depends what you're looking for, but I think that what you have to do is start backwards. I'm a big believer, kind of like the way you get from point A to point B is you have to draw what your point B is, decide where the goal is, where your point B is, and then work backwards and say, okay, if my objective is to achieve this, okay, what am I willing to spend to achieve that? And you kind of work backwards from there and say, okay, whether it's as a percentage of revenues, a percentage of profits, whether it's as a percentage of the overall budget, whatever the numbers that you're gonna what you're gonna work with, it has to be based on as much of reality as you can. And your best reality is what you're trying to achieve. And like with everything else, even as you price it at the beginning, along the way, you may need to either spend more or spend less, depending on the situation and what warrants it. And at each point in time that you're making those decisions, you're basing it on what's my return on these invested dollars going to be, and how close and how is this going to get me to the goals that I've set for myself and for our company.
As digital products gain traction and user bases grows, many entrepreneurs face challenges in scaling their infrastructure and operations. The business has to continue working without interruption, but some changes in software and management are needed. What strategies do you recommend for managing such a growth phase effectively? Maybe you have some tips for our listeners.
In the ideal world, while you're shutting if you have to shut anything down, you have something parallel going on that's going to be keeping it up while you're working on this. So it's as simple as, let's just say, you're running a taxi service, right? If you have one car that needs to be taken out of service for a while to be fixed, hopefully you have a couple of other cars that can operate so that the customers don't get impacted by your taking one down. So, that's not always the case. That's not always possible. So whatever you do, I think you have to be transparent with your customers and say, hey, here is what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and here's how it's going to affect you, and we're going to try and minimize any negative impact to you as much as possible. I think that every time you're going to interrupt the service or you're going to take something down, whether it's just a website or a feature or access to something, whatever it is, the best thing you can do is really be transparent upfront and in advance with your customers so they know what's going to happen. Don't, after the fact, come back and say, well, here's what happened and here's why. Let them know in advance, this is going to happen on this day. You're going to be down for 4 hours. Here's how we can, here's what we can do in the meantime. Here's how we can prepare for it. And I think then you're at least in a better shape. Then the customer doesn't feel like you've betrayed them. They feel more like you've included them in the decision. You've included them in your process. And I think that's long-term a very good solution.
International expansion for digital product is a really daunting task for many companies. What key considerations do you think entrepreneurs have to consider when taking their offerings global? And how do you help them overcome challenges related to the localization of their services?
So most entrepreneurs are really good, and they've gotten where they've been by faking it until they make it, right? They if they're not there yet, they pretend that they're there until they get there. That's not really always the case when you go globally or when you expand internationally, especially when you're talking about differences in everything from language and culture to legalities and to business customs and things like that. You can't just fake it until you make it. In those cases, finding a local partner in particular markets can be very effective. Finding a third party, hiring someone who maybe knows those markets can be effective. We've had success in that in some of our companies over the years in hiring someone from the target area that we're trying to pursue. There are third party organizations that can help you as long as you are very specific in what you are trying to achieve and what you're looking for. But I don't think that those are areas that lend themselves to just kind of like jumping in and figuring it out when you get there. In the same way that I couldn't come to Ukraine and just start operating simply because I don't know the language, I don't know the custom, I don't know the cultures or anything like that. It would probably sink me before I learned how to swim. And I think that that's the case with in general with most companies, regardless of where they are in the world.
Behind any successful venture or enterprise, there are always people. You have had experience with an unlimited number of companies, including those from the Fortune 50 list. Can you share what recruitment strategies and talent management best practices you have found to be most effective in building high-performing teams?
So it's hard because it depends on the industry and the situation and the teams. I think networks are always the best way to go. Letting you build a team, you build a network, and you ask for recommendations, suggestions. It's always better. You're always just ahead of the game if the recommendation comes from someone that you know, you trust, who can speak honestly about that person. So you can do that and pursue something along those lines. That being said, there are great recruiters out there, and they earn their money by finding the exact right person. They take their time to learn your business. They take their time to learn the exact position, what you're looking for. They take their time to learn you and how that person would mesh with you and your team. They're not all, every recruiter's not like that, but the ones that are really good are worth their weight in gold because they take that entire burden off of you. So I think depending on the company, depending on the position, depending on the scarcity of the skills that you're looking for, there are a number of ways to go. Again, I would fall back on saying, okay, what is the objective? You have to really be precise. The better job description that you can put together, the best way of describing the company to either a recruiter or to a candidate or to within your network so they can find someone. The better you are at that and the more detailed and accurate that you are, the more likely you'll be to find the right person, find them relatively quickly.
You help companies develop and execute merger and acquisition criteria. Can you please share with our listeners when a company can consider going into the M&A process and when it will be harmful to the business?
Okay, so I assume you're talking about when you're to go out and purchase another company. So internal growth is driven by internal investment. You can grow along certain lines internally. Sometimes, though, there are reasons why you need to look externally to grow the company and to buy another company. It could be to add an entirely new product line that you don't currently either manufacture or have access to. It could be to go into new markets that you're not in. It could be to go into new geographies. It could be, it could be to take your own products and just buy a new technology that takes them to a whole new level. Generally, you don't buy, or it's least wise to buy the exact same thing that you are, okay? Because that's not going to really have any kind of magnifier or multiplier effect. The best type of acquisition is when you can look for something and say, hey, this is an acquisition where 1 + 1 = 4 or 5 or 6, where I can take their products in my existing company and sell them to my market, and they have a new market, and they can take my products and sell it to their new markets. And all of a sudden, we've got new products from both sides going into new markets on both sides, and you've got a really big multiplier effect. When you recognize that time, that situation, or when something like that comes across, then it's time to consider an acquisition like that, assuming that financially you're in position to pursue that.
Thank you for answering, and it's all from this section. I would be happy to ask you right now flash questions. I will give you 2 options, and you need to pick the one. Are you ready?
Yep.
Great. Movies or cartoons?
Movies.
Working with startups or enterprises?
Startups.
Sunny weather or rainy weather?
Sunny.
A loud concert or a peaceful lake?
I'll say a peaceful lake because I don't know who's giving the concert.
Okay, meeting in the morning or evening?
Morning, for sure.
Thank you. That is all for now. It was a pleasure for having you today at our show, Elisha. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Khrystyna.
Click like and subscribe button to not skip the following episodes. Bye!